Welcome back, everyone. New School Sensei. I'm your host, Lance Douglas. We've got Ken, the Kaspersky King. I think that's his favorite antivirus software he loves so much. So good on you, Ken. You're back in. He loves it. And we also have Peter Whitefield. So second visit, awesome teacher, online teacher at the Online Victorian School, I think it's called, Peter?
Virtual School Victoria, yeah.
Bang. Lifetime martial artist. So he's got the Taekwondo black belt. He's blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And as Ken says, Peter has the best turtle in all of AET, the hardest turtle shell to crack.
I know that's big praise. We'll see if it can hold up.
He says you got long, lanky limbs that are just hard to expose. So yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Good attribute to have.
that's gonna be my moniker. If I ever come out to fight, it'll be Peter the Turtle Whitefield. I think that's gonna have to be
The Turtle King.
Turtle King.
So yeah, so we're not talking about turtle today. Maybe we will if we do a special turtle topic, all things turtle, whatever. Jiu-Jitsu turtle. We're talking about the history of the turtle.
Ninja
We might bring
Turtle.
you in again, Peter. But more importantly, we're talking about the topic is teaching teenagers, in particular martial arts. So this can be a tricky topic. I know for me personally, I actually didn't find it too challenging when I was younger, like coaching teenagers when I was in my 20s. But as I get older, I feel like it's teaching the teenagers gets harder and harder. So we got the man himself. He keeps up to date with all the trends. You're on all the social media, I'm sure, Peter. You got the Pokemon cards, Age of Empires. So take us away, Peter. Run us through just a little bit of a summary, your approach to teaching teenagers.
Yeah, it's always that way, isn't it? When you kind of think, yeah, when I'm younger, it's easier, but when I get older, do teenagers really change, or is it just me that's changing? It always reminds me of that Simpsons quote of Principal Skinner. It's like, no, it's the children who are the problem. It's not, it's not ever you. So maybe that's where you got to start. Are you the problem or not? Let's just put that aside if you're a problem or not. But let's focus on, I guess, the teaching teenagers. Look, for me, it always comes down to always sort of being relevant. I think you've got to be relevant when you teach teenagers. You've got to kind of be in their sort of headspace. And I think that's the thing that we lose as we get older. We forget what it's like to be in certain situations. Like you might, for example, forget what it's like to be a white belt, right? But it's unless you go back into that situation and kind of expose yourself to sort of that thought process. Very much the same for teaching in general, but also, but if you want to engage with a certain type of audience. So, for example, we're looking at our teenagers, and of course, the younger teenagers versus the older teenagers are different again. But for me, it's always about sort of being relevant and just being present with them. I think a lot of kids, especially, want you to just to sort of be there and be that person in their life that needs to kind of run a certain thing. So, for example, in the training room, you're that person. You're the guy who's running the show, but they also want to know that you're a human as well. And sort of building those strong relationships is a core part of teaching teens. That's even before you sort of step into the room. They don't need to sort of learn how to do anything until they know that firstly, you know what you're doing, that you can control the situation and that you can sort of have a conversation. I think maybe that's the difference over time. Maybe, when you thought you're younger, you could kind of just say, okay, this is what I want you to do, and the kids will do it. But as you get older, you try that same sort of style, but it's not really working. So for me, over this time, it's very much just kind of getting on that same level, but then also showing the students that, hey, I know what I'm doing. Here's a demonstration of what I know that I'm doing. And I set high expectations. I think that's one of the other things. Sometimes we think, oh, because you're a young person, we don't have to set those high expectations. But I set very high expectations for all of my students in every class. And it might take a longer to get there, but I'm never sort of shortcutting that by saying, oh, because you can't do this, we can just do something easier. Like, no, this is the goal. We will get to that, but the way in which we get to that will be um, dependent on you.
Yeah, so I guess I think it'd be cool to get into it. I guess the nuts and bolts. I know at Twins for us, if we're looking back in history, we didn't have that many teenagers because we were a fresh club. We started part-time in 2011, then full-time in 2014. And we found that teenage girls in particular, we had a big drop-off rate. So we didn't have many teenage girls, but the girls that we had were our best students, so our black belts, our competitors, national team, all that sort of stuff. And if you go forwards to now, 2025, We have quite a few teens. I know for me in particular, and I know the coaches that I'm coaching, we're having a bit of an issue teaching teenage girls in particular. We're finding the girls are the ones that are sort of hanging around the foyer chatting before class. It's a struggle to get them onto the mats. If you have a drink break, they're sort of staying back a lot. And in class, they're talking a lot. So if you have any tips for us, Pete, that are sort of struggling with those sort of issues.
Yeah, that what a wonderful problem to have, right? It's you've created such a great environment for them to come to, and I think in the first instance you kind of think, well, why are these students here in the first place? Friendship is obviously a really core component. My lifelong friends have come from training. All of my best friends have come from some element of my training over the journey. And they're my lifelong friends. So I know that, hey, I can see them every day or I can not see them for 6 months or a year and I'll still be the best friends with them. And you might feel the same sort of thing. But for me, it's about leveraging those things that you might think are negatives into positives. So you know that they're coming for each other. So um, in the first instance, I would be sort of considering how do we utilize that? Okay, you're saying that there's the talking, there's the hanging out, there's the general maybe cheekiness or the fun. How do we leverage that in a sort of that environment? And I know we might have had this conversation in the past, but for me, it's realistically looking at how do we get those sorts of skills and bring them into the room with us. So if it's talking, I'll give you an example of an activity which I really like. It's, you've got a finite amount of time, and so you've got to sort of set the parameters, and I'll sort of always go through that. Okay, so for the next 20 minutes, we'll be doing A, B, and C. So A, B, and C would be whatever the task is. But instead of just doing it and then I'll come and have a look at you, why don't one of you take on the role as a coach? So, let's say you put into groups of 3, for example. One person's coaching, the other 2 are silent. And you make a game out of it because, the first instant which that happens, everyone's laughing and carrying on. But then once you keep applying the same sort of strategies, I think it sort of starts to pay off because from your mindset, it's I want to make these students into better coaches or mentors or whatever you happen to be. Better at picking up things that they might overlook if they're not talking about it. Much like we as adults, if we don't talk about something and you just think about it, you'll eventually forget about it. But if you start talking about it, it starts to become a little bit more real. So one of the strategies I like doing is, okay, you've got a whole bunch of talkers, keep them talking, but focus it on the skill that you want. So instead of just we're going to talk about what we did on the weekend or who's watching what, well, when you're in the class, we're talking about this technique or this theme or whatever it happens to be. And that's, I guess, kind of my go-to, really pairing them up in their friendship groups to utilize that bond. And then you can sort of start to go out in terms of, all right, well, I actually want to focus on this skill and I need you to listen, but maybe I don't need that whole control. And I think part of that is also releasing some of the control back to the students, giving them some of the reins, so to speak, and let them go through the process of teaching their friend or workshopping with their friend rather than the top down, which is what I guess martial arts has traditionally been, hasn't it? You've got that coach, you've got that instructor who's sort of teaching top down, and whatever I say you do, but you can't talk while you do this. Well, why is that still a thing? Why can't we have our young people verbalize some of what they guess they want to discuss, but within a structured environment, which you would create? So that's my number one number one strategy. Utilize what you've got, which is the friendships and the bond, and get them working in some form of way where they're talking to their friends, but in a structured way.
I like it. I think my tactics there will probably be a bit old school, even though this is the new school sensei. The way that I would approach it, which is interesting, is I would pre-frame the class and say, guys, we're all going for a black belt. Yeah. Like if you want to be a black belt, you have to train hard, all this and that. And then if people are still talking, obviously I'm enforcing rules left, right, and center. There's warnings, sitting people out. And also, if I know there's friendship groups, I would be splitting people apart. These strategies work well for me, but I find it's hard to teach this to another coach. That's why I like your strategies. It's like a breath of fresh air. It's like flipping it. I remember probably a few weeks, probably a few weeks back, me and you had a chat about it, and I was really impressed with your strategies behind it. So I'll just share that with the rest of the guys. So leveraging what they want to do is talking. So some stuff that we can do, what Pete was suggesting would be if we do a drill, just say it's like a head kick drill or something like that. Yeah, we're like practicing some kicks to the head. You split it up into three. First round, you can talk, relax. You're just getting the flow of it, you know. Second round, a bit more serious. And then third round, it's very serious. No talking. Let's get some really good reps in. So that was a really good one that I'm really keen to try out. And then the next drill that I really like that you told me about, Pete, I'm sharing your own drills to you. So
Yeah,
you
of course. No, all good.
see here was that you actually get maybe you get like a referee. So that if they want to talk, they're actually scoring points, or even you've got coaches, so they're talking. So you're really you're funneling how they talk because the kids want to talk to each other. They want to socialize. So like if you have a group of four, you've got two people sparring, coach A, coach B, you know. So then it sort of works out like that. Those were the big takeaways I got from that talk with you. And that's why I want to do this podcast, just to
Mm.
share these learnings with the group. But I wanted to bring that to Lance. You've heard the way that I do it. You've heard the way that Pete does it. What's your thoughts, mate? For me, I'm a bit more of a lazier coach, more low energy. So I tackle it in two different ways. First way is I try and just organize the game or the drill. So that does all the heavy lifting for me as a coach. So if I know I've got a lot of people are chatting, we might do like a mount drill and we might do smothers. You can't talk if you're getting smothered. Like it's just it's impossible. Or you might play a backpack game. You can't talk if some guy's trying to, strangle you from behind. Or it could be if we're doing a sparring class, 2v1 sparring. How are you going to talk if you're getting punched in the face? So that that generally works pretty well for me because I'm pretty low energy. If I do want to be higher energy, just really try my best to motivate the students and actually showing that I care about the students. So an example I'll use, maybe we're running sparring and see a couple of girls are talking. I'll be just like, okay, let's see who's going to win. Is it going to be Jasmine or Jacinta? Way, nice kick, Jacinta. You're gonna let her kick you again, Jasmine? Let's go. Let's go. Okay, it's 1-1. Boom, another kick, 2-1. So you got two different approaches. One's low energy, one's high energy. And I think as a coach, it's good to have both, because if I was purely hands off, like 100% of the time, I wouldn't be building any relationships with the students. So you want to, I guess, maybe sometimes low energy. Maybe I've had a hard day on the tools. Maybe, my 4-year-old boy, it's hard toilet training him. I'm pretty tired coming into the shift. So I want to just take it easy in the shift. Maybe another day I've had a good night's sleep. I'm raring to go. So then I can put in 100% for the coaching. So yeah, just I guess it's good to have multiple different strategies. Yeah, and I think that teaching teenagers is something that I personally don't have the most reps in. Like I've got a lot of reps teaching like 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, like kindergarten, primary school age, because typically, like a student would start quite young and they get their black belt and then a lot of them drop off. Yeah. So usually your teenagers, and also, if they've got like studies and all that sort of stuff, they, if they're working, they might want to concentrate on other sports. We don't get the most reps actually teaching teens. And I feel like I would be interested to get your take, Pete. Do you think that teenagers need their own separate class where it's just like a 13 to, I don't know what age you'd put it in, 13 to, I don't know, 16 or 17? Or do you think it's fine for teenagers to still train within, like a junior group? Because the way we do it is, obviously we've got our pre-martial arts, it's all the kinders, preps, grade ones. When they're grade twos, they go juniors. Typically, when they're a teenager, which we haven't really defined, have we, Lance? They move to the adults class. So, but we haven't like told kids they need to go into that class, have we, Lance? It's more like they sort of when they're ready. Um, so yeah, so we have a lot of teens that train with the juniors, so primary school kids, start of high school. We have teenagers train with adults. What's your take, Pete? Do they need their own class, or what age groups? If you're, like if you're running your own club, how would you segment that?
It's such a uh, like you said, that it's that the sort of that gray area for sort of your own development. Sometimes you might want to feel like you're ready to mix it with the adults, and so that'll give you your, I guess, your next step up. And there are other children and teenagers who think, well, for whatever reason, I'm not yet ready, and I still want to have that ability to sort of maybe play more games in the sort of the younger class. It also depends if you've got siblings as well. I mean, sometimes siblings don't like to be split up. I mean, I remember training with my sister, and we're 3 years apart, and so we we sort of stayed in the same class. And even when we went up to adults, I think it was a very quick sort of transition. I might have gone up slightly before she did, but sort of within a pretty similar time. I think that really depends on how many teens you have. If you've got like a pretty good cohort, then they might just want their own separate class, sort of like that 12 plus, maybe not younger, but that 12 to sort of that 16, 17. And then I'd be highly encouraging sort of 16, 17, 18-year-olds to move up to the seniors, only because as they are getting bigger bodied, both boys and girls, you kind of want them to be experiencing the whole range of strength differences. Whereas in the sort of those kids classes, you don't necessarily get those differences. But also, what the adults do that kids don't is they've got a sort of a lifetime of learning behind them, and they've got a whole bunch of different strategies to overcome some of the hardships. Whereas if you're sort of just stuck in a I won't say stuck, but if you're in a teens class or a kids class, you don't necessarily see some of those real world applications of the sport that you're learning. But one of the things I really do that I would think about is getting the feedback from teens. I think this works for all kids and adults as well, but definitely I feel like people want input. And maybe that's the way that we're going. You asked before, Lance, about how do you sort of teach kids these days, or that difference is getting so vast. Well, how do you go about asking them what they sort of want to do as well as what you need them to do? I mean, there'll be a disconnect, of course, because what you need them to do and what you want them to do might and will be different to what they want to do and what they think they need to do. So I remember, I think once in a martial arts class and once in sort of my teaching capacity, I put it out there and say, well, hey, we've got a couple of weeks coming up that are kind of just we can kind of do anything for these couple of weeks. It might be in a month's time. What do you want to focus on through that time? Now, I wouldn't be sort of asking people new to the sport, new to the martial art, because when you're new, you don't know what you don't know sometimes. So once you've sort of been in the sport long enough, you know oh yeah, I really want to fix A, B, C things. And then that sort of buy-in means, hey, guess what? In a month down the road, you've said that you want to do this, and you're going to be coming probably every week until that month comes up. And then there's that buy-in of, oh, they've listened to me, they've listened to my input, and this is my input into sort of what we want to learn. And of course, as the coach, as the instructor, you can kind of make it in such a way which is not just like a standalone thing. You can sort of drag that into a course or a 2-week sort of thematic approach. Um, but yeah, when we go back to that question of should they have a class or not, it comes down to their own, I guess, their own sort of development. And unfortunately, there's no easy question. But again, if you do have a good cohort of young people who really gel well together, it might be worth having just that 12 to 16-year-old bracket.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we've talked about the challenges of teens, in particular for me and the guys that I'm coaching as well. I guess it's the teenage girls and the talking. So it's almost like they've all started with us quite young, and they've been training so long together, as you say, and they're all friends. Yeah, they all go to different schools. Like this is the only place where they actually meet up and chat. So that is another challenge. Are there any other challenges, Pete, that you've seen through your experience, whether it's on the mats or in the classroom, about teaching teens in particular?
Um, yeah, I guess the thing that sort of comes to mind, and I won't go sort of like the real difficulties as in terms of that are specific to sort of students, uh, specific students, I'll say, but I guess in more general terms, it's um, the wanting to sort of do things in front of others. And that might be somewhat limited to your experience because you have a whole bunch of kids who come because they love this. And if you've asked them, and I might ask you, Ken, do you draw upon the students to kind of demonstrate certain moves in front of the class?
Oh, definitely. As I'm getting older and tired, especially if I've trained with you, Pete, I'm knackered after training with you, Pete, smashing that turtle position. Like it's pretty hard to sort of show the kids a spinning hook kick, like all that sort of stuff. So I'm always getting my gun students to demonstrate.
And are they happy to do so?
Um, I guess so, yeah, because I either get my assistant coach who's getting paid, so they're very happy, or we're getting my best students. I haven't really thought about it that way. It's just part of the job. It's part of being a high ranking student, I'd say.
So that's an expectation that you've set for them, right? Hey,
100%.
you're a high ranking student or you're good at this thing. You know that at some point you're going to be called upon to do something. I feel like where what martial arts does really well is take kids out of their comfort zones, and especially teenagers. They take them out of their comfort zones because if you throw that student back into a school environment, they might be one of 25 that if a teacher says, okay, could someone tell me the answer to this question, they might not be that person to put their hand up and say, yeah, I've got it. But you bring them into their martial art and they'll be the first person to raise their hand. So I feel like there's a disconnect sometimes in certain classrooms where when you sort of ask for students to answer a question that they won't, but when you've called upon them in that sport environment, that they certainly will. So what I guess I've found is I in a class of 25, if I ask for an answer, there might be 4 students who will always raise their hand.
Yep.
Then you might get a couple of others who, under the right circumstances, will raise their hand, and then maybe half or a quarter will never raise their hand. So, how do I get those students to engage when, if I've asked a question of the class, because I know that they won't? So, that's potentially one of the ways in which I sort of see that question, which is that engagement factor. How do we think of other ways to engage students other than just calling on them in class? What I love about martial arts is you can do that because that's the expectation. Maybe schools, that's not always the expectation in a school for whatever reason, but how do you find other ways to get students to demonstrate? And this goes back to one of your first questions, about the communication and talking. Well, if you're in a smaller group, are you more likely to share in a smaller group? Evidence seems to suggest that yes, most students will be more or happier to share in smaller groups rather than in front of a full group.
I guess showing a kick is a lot easier than like trying to learn some history. Um, you know, I
No,
guess yeah.
it certainly is, and maybe that's the pressure situation in which we put students. I'm never going to unfairly call upon a student if they don't want to be called upon. But at some point within our education system, and that's not just in teaching, but that's just across the board, we know that learning it happens under sort of sometimes I'll say extreme circumstance, not extreme, but under some form of duress. You learn for certain reasons, and martial arts is perfect. If someone's going to punch you in the head, you need to be able to defend yourself. You need to be able to practice a move that stops you from getting punched in the face. And so you learn that under duress, whereas school, you don't quite have that duress. There is certainly no punching going on in the classroom. There might be some verbal punching, but that's completely separate. Whereas if it's a physical space, you've got to be able to do that. And it might be worth, Ken, to sort of, instead of just getting a student to demonstrate the spinning hook kick, it might be, if you want them to sort of have that same experience as the classroom, sometimes it's not only show me the demonstrated kick, but also the reasoning as to why we do it in a certain way. And then it's not just, oh, you're just doing this physical thing, which can sometimes just be off the top of your head super easy because they've been doing it for 10 or so years. But now explain to me, why do we do it in this way, and when would we use this particular technique? And then it becomes, oh, I've only just done it because I felt like it. Now I have to be able to justify my response, and that's a harder question to sort of do.
I like that. That's perfect. If we go on more about the challenges of teaching teens, if I'll throw it to Lance in a sec, but I wrote down a couple. So I found when you teach teenagers, none of the parents are watching. Whereas if you're teaching the younger age groups, all the parents are watching. So it's access to parents for teenagers is actually quite hard. Like we actually got to call them up, email them, set appointments. But if we got the younger age groups, your kinders, your preps, your primary schools, quite easy because they're literally there. So we can talk to them straight up, and they, like the parents are watching too. So it's probably a bit better in terms of that way. I've also found teaching teens when we're doing contact drills, whether it's like some wrestling, jiu-jitsu, I found it can be awkward pairing up like a 15-year-old lady with a 15-year-old male. You know what I mean? So like, or even, yeah, I found that contact drills to be tricky. So we've had to navigate that. So we usually pair up, like similar people. I think it's because maybe the 15-year-old boy stinks. I don't know. What's your thoughts, Pete?
Yeah, definitely boys are stinky, but so are girls for that matter. You work long enough with kids, they're all a bit stinky sometimes.
That's it.
Um, yeah, so the question is about that awkwardness, right? How do you get around that awkwardness?
Mhm.
I mean, if you figure that out, you figure out how to be a teenager, right? I don't know. I think you might have to just sort of live through that whole process of understanding yourself before you sort of understand, um, as a sort of a young person, to understand others. You know, I remember being a 15-year-old kid training with 15-year-old girls, and it's like, yeah, that whole that awkwardness about especially that physical side of the martial art. But again, I think structuring it is appropriate. Have that sort of like that sequential stuff. You know, you can definitely partner with someone if it's a non-contact thing, and maybe that's what you're finding, which is the difference. Maybe in that non-contact stuff, they're fine, right? There's no issue. But as soon as you sort of get to that physical stuff, it's sort of how to sort of train with somebody else. And I feel like it's a question that we have in a lot of different sort of grappling sports, which is especially with males training with females. I know some females don't like to train with males because they're either too strong or not necessarily too strong, but just don't understand their physicalness in compared to someone who might be not as um, used to sort of going that hard. And I'm not saying that's true for all male and females who train with each other. That's definitely not the case. But I definitely know of people who do that. It might just sort of be sort of building up that exposure to it. I think that's probably the best way to say it. It's, hey, you're not going to know who attacks you, for example. It could be someone bigger, stronger, younger, older. And we sort of need to figure out ways in which we can train appropriately with each other. And it might come just down to having those conversations around, yes, sometimes it's going to feel awkward when you train with different types of people, but how do we get through that awkward phase? Well, and then that's where you jump in, Ken, and say, well, yes, we're going to be doing these things to get through that awkward phase. But I think for the majority of young people, you just have to be exposed to it enough and then realize, oh, this is just another training partner, or oh, this is just another drill. And if I do what I'm taught, then I can help this other person learn as much as I'm learning. I don't know. Does that help answer your question or not really? Because
Yeah.
all I'm saying is they have to just get older.
Yeah, definitely putting some context, like for self-defense, like it's going to be someone bigger and stronger than you. We're always trying to prepare for the worst case scenario. Like I can probably, like, I'm not the biggest guy. So there's guys at Twins that we're training jiu-jitsu with. One, we got a guy, he probably isn't going to listen to the podcast, Big Nick. He's huge. And like being underneath him, side control, anything is hull. He could literally like tap me by just going like grabbing my arm and just squeezing it, or he could just grab my throat. He's that strong, mate. Like he could rip flesh off me, I feel like. So I think you just get used to it, man. But I want to throw to Lance. I know we've probably listed off quite a few challenges, but do you have any challenges with teaching teens? And then we can talk through how we'd work through that. Yeah, I guess I'm not teaching teens that much these days. I'm mainly on the front desk, but I have noticed like a steady decline in manners,
Oi.
just general manners, just being polite, just having that kind of sense of togetherness, like we're all in it together. It seems like it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more about the individual. So something I might say on the mat, like maybe the coach needs people to clean up. A lot of the teams will just walk off and it'll just be your couple, usual people they'll clean up. Um, so it'd be a hard thing to talk about because I know in society we are more geared towards being an individual, particularly here in Australia. Um, but I like how martial arts, we don't force them, but we kind of guide them to come back to being part of a community. Like we're all in it together. We've got the bows at the start. If it's karate, we've got the bows at the start. We've first bow is to the dojo, showing respect. We've got to bow to the coaches and then bow to each other. So maybe let's get some of your thoughts on that. Just like, teenagers these days are more about themselves, thinking about things like TikTok, social media, whatever. Whereas in martial arts, we're trying to bring people in together as a community. Yeah, I think from my experience, when you get students walking in, I can always relate to the younger kid a bit better. You're like, oh, that's a really cool Spider-Man top. And you just see them light up. But then you get the teenager comes in. It can be a little bit harder to bridge that gap because they already can be quite stone cold. Or they might not even be listening. They got, like got AirPods in already. They've probably got some music cranking. It's a really tricky one, eh? I guess I guess first, it's sort of hard to do with all the students. With some students, we have handshakes, all that sort of stuff. We're really close. They're happy to see you. But I guess we probably should be doing that with more students, where it's fist bumps, all that sort of stuff. It's a tricky one, man. Like, I always try my best, I guess, because we're the face of the club, so we have to do it. And plus, it's something we enjoy as well. You do get tired at the end of the night, but we're always saying hello to people, this and that. I don't know. I think maybe Pete might be able to talk more to, because he's been at the coalface with, with the teenagers for 8 hours a day, it seems like.
It might feel like that after sort of a career in teaching and before that, a career in instructing. The one that I sort of have had a conversation with my nephews who are quite young, when I sort of say goodbye to them, I say, "Would you like a handshake, hug, or high five?" And then it's like, so you're giving them that flexibility to sort of interact with you in a sort of that physical sense. But I've also included a high five in that. Sorry, a hello, so a wave. So if you don't want to sort of have that physical, or if they don't want to sort of give me a hug or a handshake, they can just sort of wave. And it's like that building in that, how do you sort of greet people and say goodbye? Because they are quite young, they tend to want to fight me. That's fine. That's cool. That's what young boys do. But I give them that option. And you might have seen sort of in the US, those primary school teachers in the United States, when you got the kids that line up to come into class and they have this sort of interaction with the teacher before they come in. Up on the wall, there's 4 or 5 different images, and they do what that image is with that teacher. So, for example, if it's a hug, they give them the hug. If it's a high five, so on, etc. And I think that's where I kind of got it from. Um, where does that fit into the martial arts? You might say, well, do we really want to hug and high five our students every time they come in? I guess that's a sort of a more of a cultural thing. But some kids love that, and the younger they are, I think that the more they appreciate that. And where does that go with our teens? You might want to hug your teenager, but definitely the greeting, I think, is important. I think you're sort of saying, hey, you greet your younger kids in a sort of different way. Well, why do you need to change that greeting with the older kids? Still, that conversation would replace that conversation about I like your Spider-Man t-shirt, and there's nothing wrong with saying that to an older kid. They just might look at you, think you're a bit of a funny daddy. The fact that I've used the word funny daddy means I'm perhaps the funny daddy, but you can still have that relationship building. If they know you're a bit of a goose, then play up to that element of yourself. Again, why are they coming in the first place? Well, you're providing an awesome location for them to hang out. They've got their friends, their family there. They're also going to be learning something quite useful in their martial art. And so even though it might be that one part of your greeting or that one part that you feel like you could be better at, you might not necessarily need so much of it, but you're still giving them that option to participate in that sort of greeting. And I guess, Lance, you go back to sort of that respect, showing respect. That's kind of built into our martial arts, but it's not built into our current sort of modern culture. No one's bowing realistically anywhere else other than in your training halls. But yeah, putting that sort of culture back on the student and making that togetherness, I feel like is a core part of a traditional martial art, where we are in this together, but also we show respect in certain ways. And then I feel like drawing that to their modern world. I mean, I didn't really sort of consider the implications of my training as a child until I got older, and thought, yeah, I've done all these different sort of traditional things, but that have made me a better person today, right? So I can deal with all these problems in my life because I have had some form of structured tradition, even though I wasn't necessarily good at it when I was younger, but it sort of paid off over time. Um, so that's my thoughts on that particular question.
Yeah, no, it sounds like we've talked about a lot of good stuff. And we always want to put out these podcasts, because when me and Ken started coaching, obviously there was nothing. So we just kind of learned on the job. So hopefully everyone listening, you picked up a couple of good insights. And yeah, awesome to have you, Peter. And we'll see everyone on the next podcast. Woos.
Oos.